Welcome back. All right, so the trade deadline is a little over a month and a half away. So I'm going to look at teams that are outside of the playoffs. So I'm going to start with Vancouver because why not? Vancouver, there's been a lot of talk about players and who may or may not go and all that. Really, since the slow start, since the really rough start to the season, there has certainly been a lot of discussion about who may or may not go, and there's a lot of opinions on this. So since 2015, 2016, I think that's a good point to look at it from. It's been rough. The only year they've made the playoffs is 2019, 2020, the year that was shortened by the pause, 36, 27, and 6. And at the time of the pause, the Canucks were kind of trending in the wrong direction. So they were a team that was really relying on goaltending. They were, definitely outplayed on certain nights they got wins. But it gave this impression, especially with how they did in the playoffs, knocking out Minnesota in the play-in round and then knocking out St. Louis in round one, that, maybe something was building here. And then Demko ends up forcing a Game 7 against Vegas before Vegas knocks out the Canucks. So definitely there was a lot of optimism that got dashed last year by a disastrous season. And this year, it's not great. So right now they sit 6 points behind Calgary in the run for a playoff spot, and they've played 4 more games than Calgary. So that's going to make things difficult right there. And so their record from 2015-16 through this year is 206 wins, 233 losses, and 60 overtime or shootout losses for a 473 points percentage. The month of January did end up being kind of rough for them. So they start off beating Seattle 5-2. They then lost 5-2 against Florida, 4-2 against Tampa, 4-1 against Carolina, as they just go through these 3 teams that are really tough to beat. Then they beat Washington 4-2, and they beat Nashville 3-1. So that road trip ended up being okay at the end of it, but they came home. They lost against Florida 2-1. That was a shootout. They lost against St. Louis 3-1. They lost against Edmonton 3-2. That was an extra time as well. Then they beat Winnipeg 5-1 on the road. Before going to Calgary and laying an egg there, losing 1-0, and then beating Chicago 3-1 to round out January. To start February, they lost the game at Nashville by a score of 4-2. So they're treading water, but they're losing ground on teams in front of them, right? So the rest of the month, on the 8th, they're at home against Arizona. Then on the 9th, they're at home against the Islanders. Those are winnable home games. And so that could push them up a couple of games above 500. Their current record of 20 and 6 and all. And it might bring back some of those hopes for a playoff spot, depending on what teams ahead of them do. Then they're at home against Toronto on the 12th. They go to San Jose on the 17th. At home against Anaheim on the 19th. Seattle on the 21st. Then they're at home against Calgary on the 24th, before we get back into the schedule as it was intended to be. On the 27th, they're at the New York Rangers, and on the 28th, they're at New Jersey. This is not a horrible schedule. It's a busy schedule, but there are some winnable games there, and I expect them to stay right around the 500 mark the rest of the way, which would put them right in line with the 2018-2019 team, where they weren't awful, but they weren't good enough to be a playoff team either. So what do you do? So all we've got here is the players on this team ranked by how many points they got, starting with JT Miller at the top, and he's discussed a lot. 44 games, 15 goals, 29 assists, 44 points, and he's a +5. Plus minus sometimes doesn't really tell you a lot, but I think with the Canucks, the guys who are pluses have had pretty good years. So $5.25 million is the cap hit until next year. I think it's too tempting not to trade JT Miller, personally. I think there's too much value there. He's still got a contract for a reasonable cap hit next season at $5.25 million. You've got a league where there's a lot of teams that are looking for a guy with a good cap hit. It might be tricky to find a taker who's got that kind of cap space, but as I mentioned in a news video this morning, there are teams willing to take on cap space at the deadline in order to help themselves with future prospects and draft picks, and so there might be a way to make that work. Quinn Hughes, 45 games, 2 goals, 32 assists, 44 points, and he's a +10. Been much better defensively this year than last year. I think he's had better defensive help alongside him than he did last season. His cap hit, $7.85 million until 2027. So it's another 5 years of Quinn Hughes beyond this year, and he's not going anywhere. Brock Besser, 40 games, 12 goals, 12 assists, 24 points. I still believe in Brock. He's a -5. $5.875 million is the cap hit. He's a restricted free agent this coming summer. The $7.5 million qualifying offer he requires makes it difficult to trade him. I do. I think it makes it difficult to trade him. I think it lowers his value. And so I think if you're the Canucks, you kind of have to decide not to trade Besser and figure something else out. Unless you can find somebody who wants to give him that $7.5 million. Because the other option is that a team trades for Besser, they give up assets, and then they don't qualify him for $7.5 million and they try to get him signed for less. The only way that works is if Brock Besser signs a contract with another team before the trade. So if another team signs him to an extension and then the Canucks trade Besser out, you're probably going to get a lot back. Otherwise, it's probably not going to be much. Then you got Elias Pettersson, 46 games, 11 goals, 13 assists, 24 points. He's a -2 on the season. His play has been much better over the last, since Bruce Boudreau took over. But because his numbers are bad on the season, there's plenty of talk about trading Pettersson. $7.35 million cap hit until 2024. I still think that cap hit's fine. Pettersson's having a down year. It happens to young players. And you're not going to get full value back for Pettersson. And, you're going to send him to a team like where? Like, does he go to Florida and light it up? Does he go to Carolina and light it up? To the Rangers? Like, who do you send him to? And then watch him light it up and see if he holds up a Stanley Cup at some point in the near future. And then we've been through that in Vancouver. So, for Pettersson, I really think he's not going anywhere. So, all the speculation and discussion, I just can't see it. Connor Garland's an interesting case. 41 games, 10 goals, 14 assists, 24 points, and he's a +8. And I think Garland's been good. Garland is a 20-goal scorer. He's a 50-point guy. On the right team, he might be able to get up to 60, 65 points. On the right team, he might get closer to 30 goals. He has the heart and the drive. His cap hits $4.95 million until 2026. Now, this is where it gets odd. Right now, Connor Garland has all kinds of value. He has a lot of value on the market because of the contract Benning signed him to. This is not a bad contract. We can discuss the contracts that Benning signed over his time here, but the Garland contract is very reasonable. The problem with it being that with adding that and adding Oliver Ekman-Larsson, you cost yourself some flexibility for next season and beyond, which would be okay if the Canucks are a playoff team, but they're not. So I don't think they can overlook the value of Connor Garland at this point. I think that Garland may very well end up being on... I don't know that he gets traded, but at the very least they should be listening to offers because there could be some that are pretty high. Bo Horvat, 41 games, 13 goals, 10 assists, 23 points, and a -3. And it's been a down year for Horvat. Absolutely. But he's trending towards, 20 goals, about 45, 50 points. He's the captain. He's not ever going to be an 85, 90 point guy. He's never going to be a guy who wows you on every shift, but he's a hard worker. He is a leader. I've seen complaints about his leadership in Vancouver, and I get it, but he's still young. He's still growing into all this. His cap hits $5.5 million until next year. With the numbers he's putting up now, I don't think that his contract at the end of 2023 ends up being an extension that's really, really expensive. For that reason, I don't think Horvat's on the market. I don't think he'll be on the market, and I think he's a Canuck for as long as he wants to be. I don't think the team will look to move him. Pearson, 42 games, 7 goals, 12 assists, 19 points. +3, though. Pearson, I've been on the fence about. I was not happy with Pearson at points this season, but he's gotten better. He makes $3.25 million until 2024, and it was one of those head scratchers from Benning when he signed him to that extension. There were some who felt $3.25 million was too expensive. I will somewhat agree with that in that I think you could probably replace Pearson for less and get the same amount of points. It makes it tougher to trade him. What might make it a little bit easier, if the Canucks retain salary, the fact that he is signed through 2024 might make him an attractive option for a team. I'm just not sure where he'd go or what that would entail. He's likely still a Canuck at the deadline. Höglander, 45 games, 8 goals, 7 assists, 13 points. He's a -3. Makes $891,000 till 2023. I don't think Höglander's been as good this year as last year. And we can have the debate about whether or not that has to do with ice time or maybe he's not getting those same opportunities. But I don't think Höglander's had a great year. I think he's been good. He is still on pace for about 15 goals, which is solid. I think Höglander still has a lot of potential. I don't know that he's ever a star, but I think the potential for him to be a guy who scores 20 goals every year is there. Tyler Myers, 46 games, 11 assists, and he's a +9. He's got the best plus-minus rating on the team, but he makes $6 million till 2024. A, Myers is virtually untradeable, I think. But B, if they retain salary, who knows, right? Myers, it is 2 years past this one that it's $6 million. Obviously, that's the issue. If Myers was making half of that, I don't think we'd hear as many conversations about Myers. But he is making $6 million a year, and it was a contract that at the time it was signed, people said, "Wow, that's a little bit high." And so Myers probably a Canuck through the rest of that contract unless they figure it out this summer. I can't see him being a trade deadline deal. Podkolzin, 43 games, 7 goals, 3 assists, 10 points. He's a +5. There have been complaints about the ice time he's getting, which is standard. Around the NHL, you are always going to see the young player who isn't getting the ice time. And whether it's a coach doesn't have faith in him or he just doesn't have the chemistry with the right line mates, whatever it is, you're always going to see that complaint about certain young players not getting the time. For Podkolzin, it's not as important that he gets it this year. It's about progression. So as long as what he's going through now ends up making him a better player later, but we'll see, right? $925,000 is his cap hit until 2024. There's no reason to even consider moving Podkolzin, and I don't think the Canucks will. And I think there's a lot of potential there. He is a hard worker. Even if Podkolzin busts, and if his ceiling is 20 goals and 35 or 40 points, he will still be a useful player. He will always have a job in the National Hockey League. Just may not be the star role. But again, first year, we really don't know yet. Tyler Mott, 31 games. Chase on first. 37 games, 5 goals, 4 assists, 9 points. He's a -3 on the season, $750,000 for this summer. I think if they find a taker for Chason, I think they take it because he's on an expiring contract. It's just league minimum. I don't know that there's a market for Chason, but at the deadline, you never know. There's always guys that we see get traded at the deadline that we think, well, that's an odd name to get moved at the deadline. They gave up an asset. Interesting. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. Now Tyler Mott, 31 games, 5 goals, 4 assists, 9 points. He's a -1. Not -1. But he's a -1, -1 on the season. Should just say -1. $1.225 million until this summer. Very, very popular with Canuck fans. Huge popularity. He's one of those guys that I think is ultimately replaceable, though. And for Mott, he can be the best player in certain games for the Canucks, which I think is more of an indictment of some of the guys at the top of the board than people may intend it to be when they talk about, wow, Mott looks great. Yep. The other guys up there don't. So it definitely makes him stand out more. I would not be surprised if Mott gets moved at the deadline. He is a heart and soul player. He is one of the more popular players, I think, among the Canucks, at least from what I see on social media and whatnot, but I would not be surprised to see him get moved. Oliver Ekman-Larsson is not going anywhere unless he wants to. 37 games, 5 goals, 4 assists, 9 points. The cap hit of $7.26 million until 2027. It's an issue. It's why Arizona made him available last offseason and this past offseason, and they made the move. And the rumor that he was going to go to Vancouver was out there 2 years ago, and here he was. And it's been good defensively. Defensively, he's solid. He's very good on that side of the puck. The offense is not what it once was, and so much like Myers, if he made less money, I don't think there'd be complaining. But it's the fact that Myers and Ekman-Larsson take up $13 million in cap space put together as part of the Canucks issue. Sometimes fans will say, well, I'm fine with that cap hit. Okay, but if you add the caps together of these players who are making too much money, so 7.26 here, 6 million here, so that's 13. So you have Pearson, Myers, and Ekman-Larsson taking up $16 million of your cap space. And again, that's the problem that we have. When we look at the whole picture, Canucks have some cap problems. Luke Schenn has been fantastic. 30 games, 2 goals, 7 assists, 9 points. He's a +8, $850,000 till next year. I'd honestly be upset if they traded him. Luke Schenn has looked very good in Vancouver. I think it's the best he's looked since he was last in Vancouver. I know he played in Tampa. I know he won Stanley Cups there. But I think he looks great in Vancouver. It worked last time he was in Vancouver, and I was kind of surprised he left because it just felt like his career got a resurgence in Vancouver, and so I'd like to see them hold on to him because I do believe next year there should be something to play for. Lamico's been okay. 39 games, 3 goals, 4 assists, 7 points. He's an RFA this summer, $750,000 cap hit. He's a -2 at the plus-minus. I don't know that he's got any value. They might look to move him. Again, he's an RFA, so if anybody picks him up, they have control over his contract, but I don't think there's much there. Dickinson, there's been plenty said about Dickinson. 43 games, 3 goals, 3 assists, 6 points, and a -2. It has been a bad fit. It just hasn't worked. $2.65 million cap hit until 2024. It does make Dallas look like they made the right decision in making the moves they did in the offseason, especially with Dickinson not working out in Vancouver. Definitely was a better fit in Dallas. I don't think he gets moved, though. I mean, he's got term. $2.65 million might be a little bit high unless the Canucks retain salary. Highmore, 22 games, 2 goals, 4 assists, 6 points. He's a +1, $725,000. He's a restricted free agent this summer. I like Highmore. I think the Canucks keep him around. I think they're bottom 6, while we would like to see more goals from it. I think Highmore's played well. He's got a lot of heart. Brad Hunt, 17 games, 5 assists, and a -8. $800,000 cap hit until this summer. If somebody calls about Brad Hunt, the Canucks will listen. I'm not sure there's much market for him, though. Same with Dowling. 21 games, 2 goals, 2 assists, 4 points, a -3, and $750,000 cap hit until 2023. So it's possible there's a... But and this is where the market really drops off, right? You have Kyle Burrows, 31 games, 1 goal, 2 assists, a -5, $750,000 till next year, 2023. Tucker Pullman, 39 games, 1 goal, 2 assists, 3 points. He's a +3. The $2.5 million cap hit for Pullman does look like it's too high, and that's till 2025. So again, you'd have to retain salary to move him, and I'm not sure how much of a market there'd be with Pullman right now. Travis Hamonic, the enigma that he is, 9 games, 1 assist, a -1. He makes $3 million this year and next year, unless he gets bought out, which I would think he gets bought out. Hamonic, it's this big mysterious ball that the Canucks have got, and whatever that crystal ball is going to tell us, no idea. Guillaume Brisebois, just the 1 game, a -5. He's a restricted free agent this summer. Bowie, 2 games, a -3, $725K. He's a free agent this summer. Noah Juleson, 5 games and a -3, $750,000. He's a restricted free agent this summer. I'm okay with them keeping Juleson around. Rathbone, 9 games, -5, $925,000. He's a restricted free agent this summer. Rathbone, I will agree with Canuck fans on some level that it'd be interesting to see how he would work under Bruce Boudreau's system. The one thing with Rathbone is, if you have Rathbone out there and you have Hughes out there, that's a small defense. And what we've seen in the NHL over the last, I'll say especially the last 5 years, big defense is usually a winning defense. And so if you have 2 smaller guys out there, you can't just offset it by saying, well, Tyler Myers is bigger than a human, so that offsets it. Not really. Bailey, 14 games and a -5, $750,000. Good foot soldier. I guess he could get moved at the deadline. And Sheldon Dries, 2 games, an even 0 on the plus-minus. I should have made that one green, I guess. And he's a free agent this summer, $750,000 cap hit. There's not a lot of value with the Canucks when it comes to the sale. And then you get into the goaltending. Demko, $5 million cap hit till 2026. That looks fantastic right now. 17-15-2 record, .917 save percentage. Halak's 2-4-2, .918 save percentage. $1.5 million cap hit. He's a free agent this summer. There's been a lot of talk about whether or not they'd move him. He has a no movement clause. So much like Ekman Larsson, it's up to Halak about whether or not he ends up being moved. And so I have no idea what's going to happen there. I know people are worried about a cap penalty for how many games Halak ends up playing, but the Canucks are going to be in cap trouble either way next year. Spencer Martin looked very good. 1-0-2, .958 save percentage, $800,000. He's a free agent this coming summer. Michael DiPietro, 0-1, $824,000. Or $811,000 is his cap hit until this summer where he's an RFA. $824 is his save percentage. Again, young goaltender. It sometimes takes them a while. So in terms of which players I think actually go for the Canucks, I think the guys with actual term will get you the best return. And that'd be JT Miller. That'd be Connor Garland. I think if they try to move Besser, I think you get less back. He's got 12 goals in 40 games, a $7.5 million RFA requirement, or else you might lose him as a UFA. That's going to scare teams off. And much like other members of the Canucks, it's been really tough go. It was really tough under Travis Green. It's been better under Boudreau. But as we saw with that road trip going through Florida, Tampa, Carolina, and then Florida came in, St. Louis came in, the Canucks just aren't on that level. The effort is there. The defensive side of the puck has been much better since Bruce Boudreau took over. But for them to actually be in the running for the playoffs, we'd all like to see them in the playoffs next year. The right decisions have to be made. And so you have to have that cap flexibility next year. And I think that's where talking about the possibility of Garland and Miller comes in. Garland's not old by any stretch, but that's another reason why he has better value. Miller is not an old player either. That gives him better value too. So it's about maximizing the return, analyzing the value, and all that fun stuff. So there you go. Let me know your thoughts in the comments section below. As always, like I said, I'll talk about other teams, especially since we don't have a regular NHL game until Monday. I will definitely look at other teams that are outside of the playoffs right now and likely sellers. I have the Canucks as likely a seller at the deadline. All of the indications from what management has said sounds like they're evaluating whether or not they're going to be sellers, but sounds like they're leaning towards it, so we'll see. Let me know your thoughts in the comments section below as always. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you're browsing your way through, you just happened upon this video. Thank you guys so much for watching, for all your support. I will talk to you again soon.